Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Release the World for Christ presents the Chris Panos Show. God has burdened Chris Panos to reach 1 billion souls enslaved behind the iron and bamboo curtain. Fresh from recent journeys to these countries where he has distributed Bibles and preached the living word, here is Chris Panos.
Welcome to the Chris Panos Show, Mrs. Gandhi. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here and to be able to interview such a wonderful person as yourself. Today and yesterday, literally hundreds and thousands of people are just coming into your walkway and pleading that Mrs. Gandhi return to power. And I want to ask you a question. I don't think that the United States has seen you as a mother of love, one who cares for her country, one who's had pain and bitterness, and I just want to ask you to share what you feel about India and what you really want to do for India.
Well, you know, I was brought up in an atmosphere when our country was not free, and the whole house was a center of the freedom movement. And freedom to us meant not just freedom from foreign rule, but freedom from everything that had made the country weak and which caused hardship to the people. That is poverty, economic backwardness, and all that implies. So I was always had this very deep commitment to the Indian people, and because I've always lived amongst, well, literally masses of people coming to whichever house I've been in, before and after freedom, and they come to tell their stories they share their joys and their sorrows. So I've been very much involved with it, and I feel it's happening to me. And I think that I'm able to convey this to them, and that is why they've come to me, whether I'm in power or not. But most people abroad do not see politicians in that light. For them, politics is a career. Now, to me, it's not a career. It's something that is it's essential to do. And until we can remove poverty, I mean, we can't remove it absolutely, of course, but until we can lessen it and raise the standards of living of the people so that they can have some human dignity, live a life of decency, and begin to stand on their own feet, I feel the task is not over.
Well, you have a tremendous job. My wife, Ernestine, commented to me over the last 11 years we've been coming in and out of India, the great change in the country itself, and she commented many times, "Oh, Mrs. Gandhi has done such a wonderful work here in India," and we want to certainly tell you what the people of America think about you too. I wanted the people of America to really feel your heartbeat, and I don't think that you've been given a fair chance in America for people to know the real Mrs. Gandhi. And I am hoping that you will share a little bit about some of the things you'd like to do for India when you come back into power.
Well, the basic thing is to let the fruits of independence reach to the people. Now that means it's a long and very hard journey, and nothing worthwhile in life is easy, ever. Now what we have to do is my father built the foundations of the nation, and we have been trying to build over it, to try and increase our production of agriculture and industry, because it's only when you have the goods that you can give it to the people. Then we have to ensure proper distribution so that what we have is not confined to a few rich people or a few cities, but goes to the furthest points and perhaps those who need it most. Along with it, we have to see that the people get social justice, because we've had many social evils, and there are people who've been denied even though, I mean, they may not be poor necessarily, but they haven't had the same opportunities as others, or there's been discrimination. Now we have to fight against that, things like casteism, or what we call communalism, that is, you know, any one religion being considered less than the other.
Yes.
You know, in our country we have all the religions of the world and very large minorities.
I wish you would comment about the minorities a little too.
Well, you know, we have, the last census showed about over 60 million Muslims, but I think they've gone up considerably since then, and about 15 million Christians. Now, they're citizens of India, and we believe they should get equal opportunity. And I think that I was able to do a great deal in this direction, because in the early years when I was Congress President, or even before, I discovered that a lot of people felt that how can a minority person become say Chief Minister of a state, because the majority is another religion and they just won't stand for it. So I worked for it without any fanfare or slogan mongering, and I was able to change the atmosphere so that we've had now Muslims in the highest possible places, like President of India.
This one. What do you think about the President's speech last night?
Well, I haven't read the speech, but I'm glad he's assured us that elections will take place on time. If there were doubts, it's not we who are creating them. It's important members of the ruling party who have been talking rather loosely and say, well, maybe they won't be held, maybe there will be a border incident, maybe there will be something else.
Let me ask you this. How is the money coming in for the campaign?
Well, I'm sorry to say there's precious little money. We print coupons, you know, and then we, so that however small an amount it is, the person gets a receipt for it. And most of the money is by very ordinary people. There are some people who give an amount every month, quite small amounts, and others give specifically. Sometimes the candidate himself will collect. Then
The
we have
individual
membership
people,
fees.
in other words, the little people out there that have
Yes.
very little money,
Yes.
they're the ones that are giving to Mrs. Gandhi
Yes.
because they believe in her.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this now. For instance, when I go by train, the porter doesn't charge. Now, when we say, no, you must take the money, he said, well, all right, I'll take it, but you put it in your fund, and, you know, he'll hand it back, that sort of thing.
And so you get many gifts that people will just walk from right off the street and say, Mrs. Gandhi, please let me contribute to
Well,
you.
we don't get enough such gifts, but we do get them.
Yes. Well, I
And
think
then, of
that's...
course, we get money from our membership trips. You know, when a person becomes member, he pays so much. Then existing MPs or members of the Legislative Assembly of our party, they have to give so much of what they get.
How could the people of the United States help Mrs. Gandhi?
Well, the main problem is there's been such hostility in the press and the media that there is a need to create greater understanding. Now, part of this is because they have never considered India as part of their global strategy. I mean, it's always, you know, they're worried about Pakistan and they're worried about China, and India just happens to be there. And the other thing is that because of the power of the United States, many countries have done exactly what they were told to do. Now, we have a very clear idea of our national objectives and goals and the road by which we want to reach them. And we find it's not always appreciated, especially by the administration there. So they think we are just being difficult. Although, I mean, it's not nice to say I told you so, but in many things, Vietnam and so on, what we had said, well, if you go along this way, this is what's going to happen, and that is what did happen. So we have to look, each country, but I mean, I can only speak for myself, each country has to look for its own interests and its own future. We certainly want friendship with all countries, and we place very great value on friendship with the US. I'm happy to say that although the administration and the press have not always been with us, the people have been very friendly.
Yes.
And I mean,
The people of the United States have always said good things
Yes.
about Mrs. Gandhi. And my real thought is how can the people of the United States help Mrs. Gandhi now?
Well, this
in
is
this
it, to try
campaign
and
to
achieve-
raise money to help you?
Well, I don't know if it's proper to raise money abroad, and there are many rules here. It's not easy to get
I
money
see.
from abroad. But we do need financial help, and we do need sympathy and understanding.
So do you feel that that actually that when should you return as Prime Minister, that actually that you will seek better and stronger ties with the United States?
Well, I have always done so, but somehow from that side, there hasn't been the response there should be. Sometimes there's been a response personally. For instance, when I went the first time, 1966, perhaps you saw the papers that President Johnson went out of his way to be nice to me, and
Yes.
this was commented upon by
That's because
everybody.
he was from Texas.
I see. But still, his opinion of India was quite different. I mean, he delayed signing the, the paper giving us wheat, and that was a time of famine and great difficulty
Yes.
here. So sometimes this kind of, I don't know whether it was advisors who came in the way or what.
Do you feel that that everything in India now that is coming right on time? Do you feel that the country now is peaking itself out to where that poverty is going to be definitely dealt with?
Absolutely the contrary, because we have, in the 2.5 years of rule by the Janata Party, we have gone backwards in every possible way. Where we had left so much, we had left a very good bank account in the country, almost embarrassingly large foreign exchange, balance of payment situation, and exports, production, industrial as well as agricultural at its peak. Nothing could, I mean, it was absolutely at its, the best it had ever been, and this was commented upon by the World Bank as well as International Monetary Fund and many universities and other experts, and teams came here to see how we had managed to do it. Now, in these 2.5 years, this is just completely finished.
In
Now
other words, practically
they have
bankrupt.
no money. They're saying they have no money to help the drought-affected people. And the law and order situation, of course, is absolutely disastrous. There are so many murders and thefts and dacoities taking place. Nobody's safe anywhere.
In other words, this party is more or less for the rich instead of the poor.
Well, I would say it has helped the rich, but I would say it just hasn't governed. It's just, the country has just drifted.
They just
And-
don't have the
and
authoritarian
it's just been
rule.
No, it's not authoritarian rule. It's just been weak. If you don't know your
Yes.
mind, you don't know where to go, you can't take the first step. I mean, you can go slowly or fast, but
They're
unless
not well organized in.
they're not interested, they don't have the competence, and they don't have the will, because they're too busy trying to hold on to the chair and decide who will sit in which chair.
In other words, they're seeking power.
Well,
And
that's how they
glory.
came, because otherwise such very disparate parties with completely different ideologies could never have got together unless they said, well, we are throwing aboard anything that we believed in before, and now our one aim is to be in government.
So now you feel that,
And that is why the people are fed up.
I see. Well, that's the real truth too,
And
because
there's
this is what we've
tremendous
been
atrocity,
hearing.
especially in the rural areas, against the weak, what we call the weakest section, the most oppressed socially and economically.
Mrs. Gandhi, one of the questions that I have been thinking about recently very much is how that so many people make such a big fuss about the authoritarian movement, that you were such a person of authority, that they don't really understand organized authority. I wish you would express yourself along these lines.
Well, frankly, they just invented this word. As one of our newspapers said, that the word authoritarian just means Mrs. Indira Gandhi.
Yes.
It has no other meaning. The only, because I think I'm the very contrary of that. Unless you call taking quick decisions as authoritarian. But apart from that, I always consulted not only my cabinet colleagues, but a large number of other people, and the crowd that comes to me in the morning, it's a cross-section.
In a multitude
The-
of counselors, there's great wisdom.
well, it's not that, but you know, to get a feel of what the country needs, what they want. All these people I meet, and they're from all sections. I mean, they're industrialists, they're middle-class people, professional people, right down to the very poor people. And I get a feedback from them as to what it is. So, and I think that's how democracy should work. I mean, of course, elections are there and all those other things. Apart from that, in the government itself, we were working towards what we called democratic decentralization. That is, we have elections for many bodies right down at the village level. And those people decide on, you know, their own development. It hasn't worked as well as it should, because we find that even at that level, some people become very dominant and they try to suppress the others. But I think this is something that will only work out through a process of trial and error and experience. And of course, by those who are weaker gaining greater self-confidence and capacity to put forward their point of view and not knuckle under when somebody is pressurizing them.
Well, what about the thought of that there was no real suppression under your administration?
Well, there was a curbing of democracy, but as I said then, it was in the interest of saving democracy. I mean, at that time I described it as a medicine. I said, if a person is ill, you have to give a medicine which the person may not like, but which is essential for him.
But it may taste a little bitter.
And it may taste bitter. Because in a situation of extreme economic difficulty and other burdens, when drought, shortages, global financial crisis, fuel crisis, and that was the time when the Arab nations first put up their oil prices and got together. At that time, the opposition parties here wanted to bring down the government by entirely unconstitutional, undemocratic means. They were not prepared to wait for elections. They were not prepared just to have, peaceful demonstrations. They were inciting violence, inciting the police, inciting the army not to obey orders. Not that we called out the army, but the call was made to them that you should not obey. Students were out on the streets setting fire to libraries, breaking up scientific equipment. The whole of government machinery became so irresponsible that, you know, these roundabouts we have in Delhi, all hours of the day they were pretending it was lunch hour and playing cards there. I mean, 3 o'clock you went there playing cards, 12 o'clock you went there playing cards. So there was a danger of the whole thing cracking up. And if that happens, and because it was a time of difficulty, suppose we had not been able to reach food to the people or their other necessities, then they would have said, well, this system doesn't work for us, so let it go. I mean, this is how democratic systems have been removed earlier. And what we did gave the country a shock treatment. And it made everybody, we did not beyond the initial people being arrested, and of course some curbs on the press. And I'm sorry, we've expressed deep regret if any hardship was caused. I know some was caused, but because people at different levels misuse their authority. Now, unfortunately, that has happened before emergency. It has happened very much more after emergency under Janata Party rule. But at that time, the whole focus was on what was happening here. People who were arrested for ordinary crimes pretended they were political prisoners. And I've just seen in a book that's recently come out, somebody being defended as a person of integrity, whereas we know he was arrested for stealing something and trying to smuggle out a very precious book, a Quran, by the way, which belonged to the time of Emperor Akbar, of the Mughals, of smuggling it out of the country. Now, in fact, it's my aunt who's presented him in her book as a man of integrity who's being punished during the emergency.
What's the name of that book?
The Scope of Happiness.
By who?
Mrs. Pandit. So now that's not just one instance, so many books. And I know that people who were wanted here for different crimes went abroad and said, oh, we are going to be arrested as political prisoners. And governments like the German government and others gave them asylum and gave them money while they were there, who were ordinary criminals. So they used this period for such purposes. But And as I said, that some things did go wrong, and they go wrong when you're dealing with a population of this size and problems which are gigantic in size. Some things are bound to go wrong. For instance, in hospitals with the best of medical care, some cases do go wrong.
Right.
It's not that the doctor wants it to go wrong or the
There can be an
nurses,
accident.
There can be accident. So some of those things happen, but as I said earlier, that they haven't really been able to find out anything which you would really call an excess and so
Well,
on.
you know, one thing that really...
And then it was, although I had declared emergency, it was I who closed it, I mean, who
Yes.
revoked it.
That's what I
And
was just getting ready to
It
say.
was I who
Who
called
gave
for
the
new
free
elections
elections, too.
and accepted the verdict of the people when they voted against us. And we
Yes.
accepted it with cheerfully, and
Yeah, this is what I think that so many people missed in America, that it was Mrs. Gandhi
Yes.
that actually that brought forth free elections here. So in other words, you didn't have to have free elections.
no, because, and also we had taken Parliament's permission to postpone them for 1 whole year. But in spite of that, and regardless of whether we would win or lose, we had them because I thought, well, the country is now stable and the economy is sound, and there's no reason not to have elections.
And now the economy is very disrupted, and
Now I'm
And there's a
afraid
great
it's a
burden.
very difficult situation, and it's going to be a terrific task to get things back on the rails.
well, I think it's wonderful how that you've reached down to help the minorities too. And if you could elaborate on this.
Well, it's all part of my vision, and my aim is for a strong India, which is strong not just in, materially or in military. In fact, I don't want military strength except just to be able to defend ourselves. But which has developed its own ideology. You know, India has, I think that our philosophy is very deep, and it's something that can help the whole world. But we can only tell these things to the world if our own house is in order.
Yes.
So my dream is to try and take India to that position where nobody can threaten our independence or try to pressurize us or to push us around. But in order to do that, you have to have peace and stability in the country. You can't have peace in society unless those who live there feel secure and feel that they are getting a fair deal. So the minorities are a very important part of that. I mean, if they feel that because they're a minority, therefore they're lesser, then you won't have that feeling of security or oneness or unity, which is so essential for any kind of development work or for progress or for fighting poverty,
Yes.
because I think our worst enemy is poverty. Now we've made a dent, a very small dent, but nevertheless we made a dent in our, we had a 20-point program, and we had a land reform program to give houses to those who have no homes at all in the rural areas. Then we had fixed minimum wages for agriculture, labor,
I
and so
think
on,
that
lots
is-
of things like that.
Mrs. Gandhi, you know, so many people really misunderstand and think that you are communistically inclined, or you are a leftist, and I it's quite the contrary. And I wish you would express yourself on this.
No, the point is that we have gigantic problems of poverty. Now, how are they to be solved? We can't just leave them to market forces. We can't leave them to big business to do what they like. In fact, we do leave them a great deal to them. But unless government steps in and helps these poor people. Now, this is what people probably think in your country, that we should leave it to private enterprise. Now, if we left it, we would never get rid of our poverty. So what we are doing is we are not following, we do call ourselves socialists, but it's not a socialism that is followed by, say, the communist countries or by
Right.
Soviet Union. Or, like today, I had an interview with a Swedish person, because they have a welfare state. Now ours, we're trying to find our own path, what suits the Indian genius, what's going to answer the questions asked by the Indian people, what's going to meet the demands of the Indian people.
So it's a democracy,
So
more or less.
it's a full democracy, and we are trying to get more and more of the people's participation.
And of course, Greece is the cradle of democracy itself. And so it's a democracy itself that
it's democracy, but the government has to do many things here, which it may not have to do in an advanced country like yours. But I believe it is more and more doing things.
Yeah. Do you know one thing that I think that's so misunderstood today is in America that the people of the United States cannot visualize poverty the way it is here in India. And when my wife first came to India back in 1967, 68, she could not bear it.
Yeah.
But when she came 11 years later, after you were in power, it was just like a complete different country.
Well, there still is a lot of poverty and misery, but we can only say that we are trying our best to fight it.
Well, we know that you're doing your very best, and we appreciate you. And we want you to know that there are many in the United States that love you, and our government loves you. And we all feel that there is a tremendous upheaval coming forth of great success. I have a theme song that says, "The best is yet to come."
Yeah.
And I believe that for you. What would be in our departing words for America? Would you have a word of love or a word of wisdom that you could share with our people in the United States?
Well, America is, it's been a land of hope for many people. And it's even now throwing up some of the best ideas in all spheres. On the other hand, it has its own difficulties. I admire the American people, their dynamism, their energy, their capability. And I wish them well, and I wish to have a good relationship between the American people and Indian people, regardless of government even.
Oh, we appreciate that. Well, you're a wonderful person to interview, Mrs. Gandhi, and our prayers are with you, and we believe that the United States is going to be looking a little bit differently at Mrs. Gandhi because she's an incredible person. We believe that, and these are not swelling words, but these are words that are spoken from our heart. And I believe that the people of America, when they see this heart-to-heart talk that Chris Panos has had with such a great leader as Mrs. Gandhi, who just didn't happen to come into power, but for many years was more or less programmed by so many different circumstances and had such a wonderful father as Mr. Nehru. Thank you again, Mrs. Gandhi.
God's Spy, the story of a man who's been called a Christian James Bond. God's Spy is an incredible story of intercontinental intrigue and miracles of faith. Here for the first time is the amazing story of Chris Panos, the one-time high-rolling hoodlum the Houston underworld knew as the Greek. Chris Panos, a man who surrendered his life to Christ and now lives the life of an international spy. God's Spy and Bible Smuggler. This thrilling book reads like a Hollywood movie script, but it's true to life and more exciting because of God's participation. Chris Panos has been waylaid in Moscow by KGB agents. His hotel rooms have been bugged. His phone has been tapped by the CIA. In Romania, a beautiful raven-haired Secret Service agent unwittingly helped him smuggle Bibles past the customs. In India, Hindu mobs and radical groups have incited riots and stoned the platform from which he delivered uncompromising, fearless gospel messages. God's Spy, an unforgettable book. It's yours as part of this special TV offer. Brother Andrew said, through this book, something wonderful is going to happen to your expectancy level. Pat Boone said, God may not want to give you that kind of ministry, but he does want to give you that kind of faith, and this miracle book can help you get it. God's Spy comes to you with 3 inspiring cassette messages by Chris Panos: how to win and why you haven't, how to get power in your life, how to be a dynamic Christian. These life-changing messages and God's Spy are yours for only $18.95 postage paid. To order, call now, 1-800-453-9505. That's 1-800-453-9505. God's Spy, the Chris Panos story, and his 3 miracle message cassettes are all yours for only $18.95. Call now, 1-800-453-9505, or write God's Spy, Post Office Box 1459, Seaside, California 93955.